The alien fighter ship smashed headlong into the rocky surface of the desolate planet, shearing off entire wings and leaving a trail of burning wreckage and scattered debris as it tumbled to a smoking halt. Crumpled metal creaked and warped hull plates groaned under incredible strain. It was a miracle anything had survived the horrific impact. But impossibly, amid the twisted ruins of the alien ship, something still clung to life. Timothy Johnson, intrepid human explorer, gaped at the destruction before him through the viewport of his spacecraft. He had been charting this uncharted planet when his scanners picked up the distress beacon of a downed vessel. Humanitarianism compelled him to investigate, but nothing could have prepared him for this carnage. Donning his EVA suit, Timothy exited his ship and made his way cautiously to the crash site, climbing over mangled alien metal. Peering into the shattered cockpit, his breath caught in his throat. Slumped over the controls, deathly still, was the broken body of a Brunali, humanity's most hated enemy. Decades of bitter hostility and brutal conflicts between their two civilizations made Timothy's next choice unfathomable. His every instinct screamed at him to leave this Brunali to its fate. Let it die alone on this forsaken rock, he thought. But in that moment, Timothy's intrinsic compassion overrode a lifetime of animosity. He couldn't abandon this being to a slow, agonizing death, enemy or not. Gritting his teeth, Timothy pried open the ruined canopy, releasing a hiss of gases and the acrid stench of burnt polymers. Gently, he worked the injured pilot free from the wreckage, cradling its limp form in his arms as he carried it back to his own ship. Once aboard, Timothy rushed the alien to his medical bay, struggling to recall his xenomedic training as he assessed its dire condition. Severe lacerations, blunt force traumas, ruptured organs, and critical blood loss. He would need to act fast if there was any hope of saving this creature. As he scrambled to stabilize his unlikely patient, a single thought consumed Timothy's mind. Please, don't let me be too late. But even if he could keep this Brunali from succumbing to its grievous wounds, Timothy knew his actions here today could spell his own doom. Fraternizing with the enemy was an executable offense. If his superiors discovered he had rendered aid to a Brunali, it would mean a painful death for them both. None of that mattered now, though. Timothy the space explorer was more than an obedient soldier. He was a healer, and he had a life to save, even if that life belonged to his mortal foe. As he worked frantically to mend the alien's broken body, Timothy couldn't help but wonder, would this act of unthinkable mercy change anything between their warring peoples? Or would no good deed go unpunished in a cold, hateful universe? Only time would tell. For now, the human focused on the immediate task at hand, unaware that his fateful choice would soon set in motion events that could alter the very course of history for both their civilizations. The die had been cast, and two worlds would never be the same. Days blurred together as Timothy hunched over the console in his cramped medbay, his fingers flying across the alien keyboard. Deciphering the Brunali data was no easy task, even with his ship's advanced AI assisting in translation. But Timothy refused to give up. Too much was at stake. Nearby, Murloc lay recuperating, his once dire wounds now mending thanks to Timothy's tireless efforts. As the Brunali regained strength, Timothy worked to bridge the communication gap between them. Late one sleep cycle, a breakthrough. Timothy's jury-rigged translation software crackled to life. Can understand me? Timothy asked haltingly, the device converting his words into guttural Brunali syllables. Murloc's eyes widened. He spoke, his native tongue translated into passable English. Yes, I hear. You saved me. Why? I want to stop war. No more death, Timothy replied, tapping his chest for emphasis. He pulled up decoded files, battle plans, attack coordinates. Projecting them for Murloc to see, he continued. Your people, planning huge assault. Many will die, on both sides. Murloc struggled upright, transfixed by the damning evidence. His breath rattled. I did not know. My mission, just small part. He met Timothy's gaze. You want my help exposing this? Yes, Timothy nodded solemnly. We tell both sides the truth. Maybe stop. A klaxon blared, red lights bathing the cabin. Timothy's blood ran cold. They found us. Brunali search party closing in. Murloc grabbed Timothy's arm. Must warn your people. Send message. No time. Timothy shook his head. They'll shoot us down. His mind raced. Then, an idea. Timothy opened a comm channel to the Brunali party, while gesturing for Murloc to stay quiet. This is Timothy Johnson of Earth. I have discovered a plot by Brunali extremists to... The channel went dead. Brunali ships swooped into view, landing crafts disgorging soldiers. They surrounded Timothy's ship, weapons trained. A booming voice erupted from the lead vessel. Human, you are harboring a traitor. Surrender now, and he may be shown mercy. Timothy and Murloc shared a desperate look. Murloc saw the spark of an idea in Timothy's eyes. The human leaned in close, whispering. Murloc's face shifted from confusion to understanding, to iron will. He nodded. Moving as one, they raced for the armory, arming themselves. Timothy sealed his helmet, shouldering a plasma rifle. Get to the bridge, send the signal. I'll hold them off. No, I fight with you. Murloc gripped his own weapon, salvaged from his wrecked fighter. Side by side, they crouched, watching the Brunali troops advance on the airlock. The outer doors exploded inward. Searing bolts of plasma streaked past as Timothy and Murloc opened fire. Shouts and screams filled the corridor. Fall back! Timothy yelled over the din. Murloc laid down covering fire as they leapfrogged back to the bridge. Timothy sealed the blast doors, buying precious seconds. At the comm station, Murloc worked furiously, following Timothy's instructions. A general distress beacon blared out into space from the wreckage of Murloc's ship, drawing the Brunali search ships away to investigate. It's working, Murloc crowed. They're leaving. Quick, strap in. We're getting out of here. Timothy slid into the pilot's seat, firing up the engines. The ship lurched as it lifted off, shaking off the last few dogged Brunali soldiers still peppering the hull. Suddenly, a searing lance of pain shot through Timothy's chest. He looked down to see a dark stain spreading beneath his flight suit. A slug had punched clean through his armor. His vision swam. No! Murloc was at his side in a moment, easing him out of the chair. Timothy weakly protested as Murloc tore open a medkit one-handed, his other claw still on the flight stick. You... Fly, Timothy mumbled. Hush, friend. Let me help you as you helped me, Murloc said softly, staunching the bleeding with pressure bandages. Timothy sank into darkness. He woke later, disoriented. Murloc stood over him, a strange look on his alien features. Relief? Apparently satisfied that Timothy would live, Murloc returned to the bridge. Stars streaked by outside. Where? Timothy croaked. I plotted course to way station Zeta, as you said. Neutral ground. We can broadcast the data from there, Murloc replied, mandibles parting in what might have been a smile. Timothy's head swam. They'd really done it. Stolen proof of the Brunali's secret plans. Forged an alliance between two bitter foes. And they weren't done yet. The road ahead was still long and perilous. But for the first time in a long time, Timothy dared to hope. Maybe, just maybe, two weary soldiers could change the future. If they could learn to see each other as more than enemies, perhaps their people could too. It was a start. The battered ship limped into way station Zeta's docking bay, its hull scarred from the recent firefight. Timothy eased the craft to a stop, wincing as pain shot through his chest. Murloc placed a reassuring claw on his shoulder. We made it, friend. Now let's finish this. They disembarked, Timothy leaning on Murloc for support. The station's cavernous hangar bustled with activity, aliens of countless species going about their business. Perfect camouflage. At a public terminal, Timothy began uploading their evidence while Murloc kept watch. Suddenly, the screen flickered and went dark. A voice boomed from nearby speakers. Welcome to Way Station Zeta, Timothy Johnson and Murloc. I am Overseer Zaxxon. Please report to my office immediately. The pair exchanged worried glances. This wasn't part of the plan. In Zaxxon's opulent office, the reptilian overseer's forked tongue flicked out as he studied them. I'm afraid I can't allow you to transmit that data. What? Timothy sputtered. This station is neutral territory. Zaxxon's scales rippled with amusement. Oh, you poor naive fools. I've been working with the Brunali for years. Did you really think you could waltz in here and upset the balance of power? Murlock's mandibles clicked angrily. You're a traitor to galactic peace. I prefer to think of myself as an opportunist, Zaxxon hissed. Now hand over that evidence before my Brunali friends arrive to collect you. Timothy and Murlock bolted for the door, but Zaxxon's security forces blocked their path. Run! Timothy shouted, shoving Murlock toward a side corridor. I'll draw them off! As alarms blared, Timothy sprinted through the twisting halls of the station. He ducked into maintenance shafts, doubled back through crowded promenades, always staying one step ahead of Zaxxon's goons. Meanwhile, Murlock found an access panel and interfaced with the station's systems. His cybernetic implants allowed him to navigate the alien code, searching for a way to transmit their message. Got it, he muttered triumphantly. The United Galactic Assembly Channel. Just as he prepared to initiate the broadcast, heavy footsteps approached. Murlock spun to see Zaxxon's troops filling the corridor, weapons trained on him. Across the station, Timothy felt a surge of panic that wasn't his own. Somehow, he knew Murlock was in trouble. He changed course, racing to his friend's aid. Timothy burst into the room to find Murlock surrounded. Without hesitation, he launched himself at the nearest guard. The two species fought side by side, a whirlwind of fists and claws. A piercing whine cut through the chaos. Zaxxon stood in the doorway, brandishing a crackling energy weapon. Enough of this foolishness. But Timothy and Murlock were beyond fear now. They moved in perfect sync, Timothy dodging the energy blast while Murlock tackled Zaxxon from behind. The weapon clattered to the floor and Timothy scooped it up. It's over, Zaxxon, Timothy said, the barrel trained on the overseer's head. With trembling claws, Murlock activated the transmission. Across the galaxy, diplomats and leaders received irrefutable proof of the Brunali's secret war plans. As the full impact of their actions sank in, Timothy and Murlock shared a weary but triumphant look. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Together, the transmission rippled across the galaxy, igniting a firestorm. On Waystation Zeta's main concourse, Timothy and Murlock watched the fallout unfold on a massive holoscreen. Faces of diplomats and military leaders flashed by, their voices a cacophony of shock, outrage, and frantic damage control. By the void, Murlock breathed, his mandibles clicking rapidly. We did it. Timothy nodded, still processing the enormity of their actions. Look at them scramble. The Brunali High Command's been summoned before the assembly. A newsfeed showed human crowds cheering in the streets, hailing Timothy and Murlock as heroes. But Timothy's gut clenched as he caught glimpses of warships mobilizing on both sides. We prevented one war, but started another, he muttered. Murlock's claw gripped his shoulder. Not yet. There's still time to... The Brunali's words cut off as an alert flashed across the screen. Timothy's blood ran cold as he read the warrant for Murlock's arrest. We need to move, Timothy hissed, scanning the crowded concourse. Now! They slipped into a service corridor, hearts pounding. The station's labyrinthine underbelly swallowed them, neon-lit passages giving way to grimy maintenance tunnels. I know a place, Murlock whispered, leading them deeper. They emerged in a dimly lit bazaar, the air thick with exotic spices and the low hum of illicit deals. Beings of every description haggled over contraband and information. A gruff voice cut through the din. Well, well, if it isn't the galaxy's new celebrity couple. They spun to face a towering four-armed alien. Murlock tensed, but Timothy saw a glimmer of recognition in his friend's eyes. Zexler, Murlock growled, still slithering through the shadows, I see. The alien's lipless mouth twisted into something like a grin. "And you're still causing trouble. What brings you to my humble establishment?" Timothy stepped forward. "We need to disappear. Fast." Zexler's compound eyes glittered. "That can be arranged for a price." As they negotiated, Timothy's wristcom chirped. A priority message from Earth Command. He hesitated, then accepted the call. Admiral Chen's holographic face materialized. "Johnson, thank God. We need you back on Earth immediately. You're to be commended for—" The transmission cut off abruptly. Timothy frowned, tapping his comm. Nothing. "Sorry," Zexler rumbled. "No outside signals in my territory. Bad for business." Timothy's unease grew. Something about that call felt off. A commotion erupted at the bazaar's entrance. Armored figures pushed through the crowd, unmistakably Brunali elite troops. "Time to go," Zexler growled, shoving them towards a hidden door. They plunged into darkness, the sounds of pursuit fading behind them. Timothy's mind raced. The Brunali were after Murloc, but who had cut off his call from Earth? And why? As they navigated the station's criminal underbelly, Timothy realized they were no longer just caught between two sides of a war. They had stumbled into something far more complex and dangerous. He glanced at Murloc, saw the same purpose mirrored in his alien friend's eyes. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The fate of two civilizations, perhaps the entire galaxy, now rested on their shoulders. They pressed on into the unknown, each step taking them closer to their destiny at the heart of the United Galactic Assembly. Timothy and Murloc pressed themselves against the grimy wall of a narrow alley, their chests heaving as they caught their breath. The distant shouts of their pursuers echoed through the station's underbelly. "This way," Murloc hissed, his mandibles clicking softly. He led Timothy deeper into the maze of corridors, the neon lights casting an eerie glow on their faces. They emerged into a dimly lit cantina, the air thick with smoke and the stench of alien liquor. A burly human with a scarred face eyed them from behind the bar. He jerked his head towards a back room. Inside, they found a group of rough-looking individuals huddled around a holographic map. The scarred man from the bar joined them, sizing up Timothy and Murloc with a critical eye. "I'm Kaz," he growled. "Heard you boys are in a spot of trouble." Timothy nodded cautiously. "We need to get to the United Galactic Assembly. Can you help us?" Kaz's lips curled into a smirk. "Maybe. But first you help us. We've got a job that could use your unique skills." Murloc chittered nervously. "What kind of job?" Kaz tapped the hologram, revealing a heavily fortified Brunali freight depot. "There's a shipment coming in. Very valuable. You help us get it, and we'll get you where you need to go." Timothy and Murloc exchanged a glance. The risks were high, but they had few options. "We're in," Timothy said firmly. Days later, they crouched behind cargo containers at the Brunali depot. Kaz's team moved with practiced efficiency, disabling security systems and creating distractions. As they neared their target, a squad of Brunali guards appeared. Timothy's blood ran cold as he watched them savagely beat a captured smuggler, the alien's agonized screams echoing through the hangar. Murloc trembled beside him, his compound eyes wide with horror. I didn't know," he whispered. The firefight erupted suddenly. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air as Timothy and Murloc fought alongside Kaz's crew. They clawed their way forward, inch by bloody inch. Finally, they reached the shipment. Timothy's jaw dropped as he saw the stockpile of advanced weaponry. "This is military grade," he breathed, "way beyond anything they've admitted to having." They loaded the cargo onto their waiting ship, escaping by the skin of their teeth. As they broke atmosphere, Kaz clapped Timothy on the shoulder. "A deal's a deal. I've got a friend who can get you to the assembly." Days later, Timothy and Murloc found themselves aboard a sleek transport, racing towards the neutral planetoid that housed the United Galactic Assembly. Suddenly, alarms blared. A massive warship dropped out of hyperspace directly in their path. "This is General Krasner of Earth Command," a gruff voice crackled over the comm. Surrender immediately or be destroyed. Timothy's hands flew over the controls, desperately trying to evade the incoming fire. Murloc manned the weapons, returning fire with grim efficiency. "We can't outrun them," Timothy shouted as their shields buckled under the assault. Murloc's mandibles set in a hard line. "Then we fight. Together." He plotted a collision course with Krasner's flagship, ignoring Timothy's protests. At the last second, Murloc shoved Timothy into an escape pod. "No!" Timothy screamed as he watched Murloc's ship slam into the larger vessel. The resulting explosion tore a gaping hole in Krasner's defenses, allowing Timothy's pod to slip through. Hours later, Timothy stood before the United Galactic Assembly, his voice hoarse as he presented their hard-won evidence. The diplomats murmured in shock as they viewed footage of the illegal weapons cache. But Timothy's thoughts were elsewhere. In a nearby medical bay, machines beeped steadily as they fought to keep Murloc alive. The Brunali had been critically injured during his kamikaze attack. As the assembly issued its ultimatum to both human and Brunali governments, Timothy sat by his friend's bedside. He gripped Murloc's claw, willing him to pull through. "Come on, buddy," he whispered. "We've come too far to give up now." The beep of medical equipment echoed through the sterile room as Timothy slumped in his chair, eyes fixed on Murloc's still form. Tubes and wires snaked from the Brunali's battered body, each one a lifeline holding him in this world. Timothy's hand trembled as he reached out, gently grasping Murloc's claw. "Come on, buddy. You can't leave me now. Not after everything we've been through." A soft whoosh announced the arrival of Dr. Jean, the Assembly's chief xenobiologist. She studied the readouts, her brow furrowed. "Any change?" Timothy asked, his voice hoarse from lack of sleep. Dr. Jean shook her head. "His neural activity remains minimal. We're doing everything we can, but Brunali physiology is complex. The trauma he sustained." Timothy's lips pursed. "He sacrificed himself to save me, to save all of us." Outside the med bay, voices raised in heated debate. Timothy caught snippets of the ongoing negotiations, accusations of treachery, demands for reparations. The peace they'd fought so hard for teetered on a knife's edge. Days blurred together. Timothy refused to leave, catching fitful sleep in his chair. He talked to Murloc constantly, recounting their adventures, pleading with him to wake up. On the fifth day, as diplomats stormed out of another failed session, Murloc's claw twitched in Timothy's grasp. "Murloc?" Timothy leaned forward, heart racing. "Can you hear me?" The Brunali's compound eyes flickered open, focusing slowly on Timothy's face. Timothy, he rasped. Dr. Jean rushed over, scanners whirring. "Incredible," she murmured. "His neural pathways are regenerating at an unprecedented rate." Murloc struggled to sit up. "The negotiations, have they—" Timothy gently pushed him back. "They're not going well. Both sides are too stubborn, too afraid to trust." Murloc's mandibles clicked with commitment. "Then we must show them the way. Help me up." "Absolutely not," Dr. Jean protested. "You're in no condition to—" "Please," Murloc interrupted. "I must speak to them, while there's still time." Timothy met his friend's gaze, seeing the same fire that had carried them across the galaxy. He nodded, helping Murloc to his feet. They made their way to the assembly chamber, Murloc leaning heavily on Timothy. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd as they entered. "What is the meaning of this?" the human delegation leader demanded. Murloc's voice, though weak, carried clearly through the hall. "I stand before you as living proof that our species can work together, can trust one another." He recounted their journey, the battles fought, the sacrifices made. Timothy watched the faces of the delegates, saw hardened expressions begin to soften. "We have seen the cost of war," Murloc continued, "but we have also witnessed the power of friendship, of cooperation. The choice before us is clear." As Murloc spoke, Timothy felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Their ordeal, their pain. It all had meaning now. They weren't just two beings caught in the machinery of galactic politics. They were a bridge between worlds. The chamber erupted in applause as Murloc finished. Human and Brunali delegates alike approached, eager to shake hands, to make connections. Timothy supported Murloc as they made their way back to the medbay, both exhausted but filled with hope. For the first time since this all began, Timothy allowed himself to believe that everything would be all right. As they settled Murloc back into bed, alarms blared throughout the station. Timothy's blood ran cold as he recognized the sound. Proximity warnings. He rushed to the window, his heart sinking at the sight that greeted him. A massive fleet had just dropped out of hyperspace, their weapons primed and ready. The fragile peace they'd worked so hard to achieve now hung by a thread. Thread! Timothy's heart raced as he stared out the viewport. The massive fleet hung in space, a silent threat that shattered the fragile peace. He turned to Murloc, his friend's eyes reflecting the same mix of fear and persistence. "We need to get to the assembly chamber," Timothy said, helping Murloc to his feet. They hurried through crowded corridors, diplomats and staff rushing in all directions. Alarms blared, adding to the chaos. Timothy and Murloc pushed their way into the packed assembly chamber. The room erupted in shouting as they entered. Accusations flew between the human and Brunali delegations. "Silence!" Timothy's voice cut through the din. All eyes turned to him and Murloc. "We didn't come this far to let it all fall apart now," Murloc said, his voice weak but steady. Over the next hours, Timothy and Murloc worked tirelessly, shuttling between delegations, smoothing ruffled feathers, and brokering compromises. Slowly, the crisis diffused. The fleet withdrew, leaving an uneasy calm in its wake. Days turned to weeks as the peace accord took shape. Timothy and Murloc found themselves thrust into new roles as special envoys, tasked with implementing the agreement. Their diplomatic tour took them across the galaxy. On a windswept human colony, they oversaw the dismantling of a massive weapons platform. Timothy watched as Murloc shook hands with the base commander, both sides wary but willing. On a Brunali outpost, they mediated a tense standoff between local militants and peacekeeping forces. Timothy's measured words and Murloc's steadying presence diffused the situation before violence erupted. But it was their arrival on the Brunali homeworld that truly tested their grit. As their shuttle descended through roiling clouds, Timothy saw the scars of war etched across the landscape. Murloc grew quiet, his compound eyes taking in the devastation of his home. They were met by jeering crowds, many holding signs denouncing the peace as capitulation. Timothy flinched as a rock struck their transport, but Murloc placed a reassuring claw on his shoulder. "We knew this wouldn't be easy," Murloc said. Their meeting with the Brunali High Command was tense. Several generals openly sneered at the human in their midst, but others listened intently as Timothy and Murloc laid out their plans for reconstruction and cooperation. As they left the meeting, a commotion erupted in the street outside. A group of hardliners had gathered, their angry shouts echoing off the buildings. At their head stood a scarred Brunali warrior, his eyes burning with hatred. "Traitors!" he bellowed, pointing at Timothy and Murloc. "You would have us bow to the humans." Timothy recognized him from intelligence briefings, General Tarok, a notorious hardliner. Murloc stepped forward, his voice ringing out, "We seek peace, not subjugation. The fighting has cost us too much already." Tarok spat on the ground. "Peace? There can be no peace with humans." The crowd's mood turned ugly. Timothy tensed, ready for violence, but Murloc's words seemed to reach some of the gathered Brunali. The momentum shifted, and Tarok and his followers melted away into the crowd. That night, as Timothy and Murloc reviewed security footage of the encounter, a chilling realization dawned. Tarok's outburst wasn't just the ranting of a disgruntled soldier. It was a call to arms. Their fears were confirmed days later when the first attacks struck. A human relief convoy ambushed. A Brunali peace rally bombed. Each incident threatened to unravel the fragile truce. Timothy and Murloc worked tirelessly, racing from crisis to crisis, but they knew they were fighting a losing battle. Tarok's shadow loomed over everything, his network of extremists growing bolder with each attack. As they left yet another emergency meeting, Timothy noticed a figure lurking in the shadows. Before he could react, the assassin struck. A blade flashed in the dim light, aimed straight for Timothy's heart. Murloc moved with lightning speed, shoving Timothy aside. The blade sank deep into Murloc's chest. The Brunali crumpled to the ground as Timothy tackled the assassin. Security forces swarmed the area, but the damage was done. Timothy cradled his friend's broken body, Murloc's green blood staining his hands. "Hold on, buddy," Timothy pleaded as medics rushed to stabilize Murloc. "Don't you dare die on me now." Hours later, Timothy sat vigil by Murloc's bedside. Machines beeped steadily, each sound a tenuous lifeline. Timothy's fists clenched as he replayed the attack in his mind. He knew who was responsible. Tarok had crossed a line. The time for diplomacy was over. Timothy activated his comm unit, his voice hard with purpose. "Kaz? It's Johnson. I need your help. We're going hunting." Timothy's fingers flew across the holographic display, compiling the evidence they'd gathered. His eyes burned from lack of sleep, but he pressed on. Murloc's life hung in the balance, and with it, the fragile peace they'd fought so hard to achieve. The Brunali High Command chambers loomed before him, a cavernous space filled with chittering officials. Timothy strode to the center, his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. "Esteemed members of the High Command," he began, his voice steady despite his exhaustion. "I bring proof of General Tarok's treachery." The evidence unfolded before them. Intercepted communications, financial trails, eyewitness accounts. Timothy watched their compound eyes widen as the full scope of Tarok's conspiracy came to light. An elder Brunali, his carapace etched with the scars of old wars, leaned forward. "This is most disturbing. If true, it threatens everything we've worked for." "It is true," Timothy insisted. "Every byte of data has been verified. Tarok plans to shatter our hard-won peace." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The elder raised a claw, silencing the room. "Very well. By the authority vested in this high command, we hereby denounce General Tarok as an enemy of the Brunali people. He is to be arrested immediately." Relief flooded Timothy's veins, but it was short-lived. Alarms blared throughout the complex, drowning out the surprised shouts of the assembled officials. Timothy's comm unit crackled to life. "Johnson! We've got multiple attacks across the sector. Peacekeeping outposts, human colonies, they're hitting everything." He sprinted from the chamber, his mind racing. Tarok had anticipated their move, striking first. The peace they'd sacrificed so much for teetered on the brink of collapse. Timothy found himself in a secure communications room, surrounded by frantic staff relaying reports of spreading violence. He knew he needed help, someone with the resources and tactical expertise to match Tarok's forces. His fingers hesitated over the comm panel. The choice before him was unthinkable but necessary. Timothy took a deep breath and opened a heavily encrypted channel. "This is Timothy Johnson calling General Krasner. I know we've had our differences, but right now, I need your help." Seconds ticked by, each one an eternity. Finally, Krasner's gruff voice filled the room. Well, the prodigal peacemaker comes crawling back. What makes you think I'd lift a finger to help you, Johnson?" Timothy's teeth clenched. "Because if we don't stop Tarok, everything burns. Your career, your command, none of it will matter if we're plunged back into full-scale war." A long pause followed. Timothy could almost hear the gears turning in Krasner's mind. "Fine," Krasner growled, "but this doesn't make us friends. What's the play?" Over the next hours, they worked feverishly, coordinating their forces. Timothy watched in awe as elite human and Brunali soldiers, once bitter enemies, now stood shoulder to shoulder. Their target, a remote outpost in the Outer Rim, where Tarok had established his base of operations. Intelligence provided by Kaz's extensive smuggling network had pinpointed its location. As their assault craft streaked through hyperspace, Timothy checked his gear one last time. Beside him, Krasner did the same, their past animosity set aside in the face of a greater threat. "You ready for this, Johnson?" Krasner asked, his voice gruff but not unkind. Timothy nodded, thinking of Murloc lying helpless in that hospital bed. "Let's finish this." The ship shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace. Through the view screen, Timothy saw Tarek's fortress, a jagged spire of metal and stone rising from a desolate world. Alarms blared as Tarek's defenses came online. Laser fire lit up the sky, forcing their ships into evasive maneuvers. Timothy gripped his harness as they plummeted towards the surface. "Go, go, go!" Krasner bellowed as the bay doors opened. Timothy leapt out, his combat suit absorbing the impact as he hit the ground running. All around him, human and Brunelli soldiers engaged Tarek's forces in furious combat. He fought his way through the chaos, Krasner at his side. They pushed deeper into the fortress, dispatching Tarek's loyalists with ruthless efficiency. A massive door loomed before them, the last barrier between them and Tarek himself. Timothy placed a breaching charge, counting down the seconds. The explosion rocked the corridor. Through the smoke, Timothy saw a familiar figure. General Tarek, his scarred carapace gleaming in the harsh light. "So the human lapdog comes to heel," Tarek sneered. Timothy raised his weapon. "It's over, Tarek. Surrender now and—" Tarek moved with shocking speed, knocking the gun from Timothy's hands. They crashed to the floor, locked in a desperate struggle. Timothy's combat training kicked in as he fought to gain the upper hand. But Tarek was strong, fueled by hatred and years of military experience. A vicious blow sent Timothy reeling. He tasted blood, his vision swimming. Tarek loomed over him, mandibles clicking in anticipation of the kill. "Your pathetic peace dies with you, human," Tarek hissed, raising a serrated blade. Suddenly, a familiar voice rang out. "Not if I have anything to say about it." Timothy's heart soared as he saw Murloc, battered but alive, charging into the fray. His friend's sudden appearance gave him renewed strength. Together, they faced Tarek. Timothy ducked under a wild swing, allowing Murloc to land a crushing blow to Tarek's midsection. They moved in perfect sync, their bond forged through countless battles, evident in every action. Tarek fought viciously, but he was outmatched. With a well-timed strike, Murloc sent the blade spinning from Tarek's grasp. Timothy seized the opening, tackling the rogue general to the ground. As Timothy secured Tarek's restraints, he heard the sounds of surrender echoing through the fortress. He looked up at Murloc, relief and joy written across his face. "Perfect timing as always, old friend," Timothy said, clasping Murloc's claw. Murloc's mandibles curved in a Brunelli smile. "I couldn't let you have all the fun." Timothy activated his comm unit. "Krasner, we've got him. Tarek is in custody." Krasner's gruff voice crackled through. "Good work, Johnson. Maybe there's hope for this crazy scheme of yours after all." As they led Tarek away, Timothy knew their work was just the beginning. But for the first time in what felt like an eternity, he allowed himself to believe that a lasting peace might truly be possible. Timothy and Murloc's triumphant return to the Brunelli homeworld was short-lived. As they stepped off their shuttle, the acrid smell of smoke filled the air. Distant explosions echoed through the city, a stark reminder that their work was not nearly finished. "We should have expected this," Murloc said, his compound eyes scanning the horizon. "Old hatreds don't die easily." They made their way through crowded streets, tension palpable among both humans and Brunelli. Graffiti-covered walls, some celebrating peace, others calling for renewed conflict. Timothy's skin crawled as he felt hostile gazes boring into his back. Their fears materialized into brutal reality at the diplomatic summit. Timothy was mid-sentence, addressing the gathered delegates, when the world erupted into chaos. The explosion ripped through the chamber, showering them with debris and bodies. Screams filled the air as smoke billowed from the ruins. In the aftermath, Timothy and Murloc worked tirelessly, pulling survivors from the wreckage. The stench of burned flesh and the sight of mangled bodies, both human and Brunelli, seared itself into Timothy's memory. This is Zoran's work, Murloc growled, his mandibles clicking in anger. As they tended to the wounded, heated arguments broke out around them. Human voices called for immediate retaliation, while Brunali leaders urged caution. Timothy found himself physically separating a human diplomat from a Brunali elder as tempers flared. "We can't let this derail everything we've worked for," Timothy said, his voice hoarse from the smoke. Days later, in a secure bunker, Timothy and Murloc unveiled their plan to a skeptical audience. "You want to negotiate with these terrorists?" General Krasner's face contorted with disgust. "We should crush them!" "And risk plunging us back into full-scale war?" Murloc countered. Timothy stepped forward. "We have a captured member of Zoran's group. We use him as bait, set up an exchange. It's our best shot at bringing Zoran to the table." The room erupted into shouts of protest. Timothy weathered the storm of criticism, his drive unwavering. As they left the meeting, Kaz approached them, his cybernetic eye whirring. "You boys are playing a dangerous game, but I'm in." The desolate moon loomed before them as Kaz's ship touched down. Wind-whipped sand stung Timothy's face as he stepped onto the barren surface. Murloc stood beside him, both tense and alert. Zoran's group appeared on the horizon, a motley collection of hardened Brunali fighters. Timothy's hand instinctively tightened on his weapon as Zoran himself came into view. "So the great peacemakers grace us with their presence." Zoran's voice dripped with sarcasm. "We're here to talk, Zoran," Timothy said, fighting to keep his voice steady. "This violence solves nothing." "Violence is all your kind understands," Zoran spat. "You humans, always seeking to dominate." The exchange devolved into a shouting match, accusations flying back and forth. Timothy's frustration mounted as he saw their chance for peace slipping away. Suddenly, Zoran's demeanor shifted. A predatory gleam entered his eyes. "Enough talk. We know about Tarek's weapons cache. Tell us where it is, or we'll take it by force." The realization hit Timothy like a physical blow. This had never been about negotiation. In an instant, the air filled with energy blasts. Timothy dove for cover, returning fire. He glimpsed Murloc engaged in hand-to-hand combat with one of Zoran's lieutenants. Time seemed to slow as Timothy saw the energy blast heading straight for him. He braced for impact, but it never came. Instead, he watched in horror as Murloc threw himself into the path of the blast. Murloc crumpled to the ground, green blood oozing from a smoking wound in his carapace. Timothy scrambled to his friend's side, his hands pressing against the injury in a futile attempt to stem the bleeding. "Go!" Murloc rasped, his eyes flickering. "Stop Zoran! Save the peace!" Timothy's world narrowed to a pinpoint. Murloc, his closest friend, lay dying. Yet he could see Zoran retreating, no doubt heading for the weapons cache that could reignite the war. With his heart threatening to burst from his chest, Timothy faced an impossible choice. Stay with his fallen comrade, or pursue the man who threatened to destroy everything they had fought for. Timothy's hand tightened on his weapon as he made his decision. Timothy's hand trembled as he released his grip on Murloc's claw. The Brunali's compound eyes, normally so vibrant, now dulled with pain, locked onto Timothy's face. "Go," Murloc wheezed, green blood bubbling from his wounds. "Stop him." Timothy swallowed hard, his throat tight. "Kaz!" he called, voice hoarse. The smuggler appeared at his side, cybernetic eye whirring as it assessed the situation. "Keep him alive. I'm counting on you." Kaz nodded grimly. "We'll do what we can. Now move, before that bastard gets away." With a final glance at his fallen friend, Timothy sprinted across the barren landscape. The desolate moon's harsh winds whipped at his face as he followed the trail of Zoran's retreating forces. His boots crunched against loose gravel, each step carrying him further from Murloc and closer to the man who threatened everything they'd fought for. Hours passed as Timothy tracked his quarry through winding canyons and over jagged ridges. His muscles burned, lungs straining in the thin atmosphere, but he pushed on. As the twin suns dipped low on the horizon, he caught sight of his destination, a sprawling Brunali outpost, long abandoned, its dilapidated structures jutting from the rocky terrain like the bones of some ancient beast. Timothy crouched behind a boulder, observing Zoran's followers as they scurried about the outpost's perimeter. He counted at least 24 armed Brunali, their carapaces glinting in the fading light. Outgunned and outnumbered, Timothy knew a frontal assault would be suicide. He crept closer, using the lengthening shadows for cover. As he neared the outpost's walls, he overheard snatches of conversation. "Sure, cache is hidden in the lower levels," one Brunali soldier muttered. "Zoran wants it secured within the hour." Timothy's mind raced. He needed to act fast, but charging him blind would only get him killed. His eyes darted across the outpost's facade, noting the placement of guards, the crumbling infrastructure. A plan began to form. Moving swiftly, Timothy circled the outpost. He located a section of wall where erosion had created a small gap, just large enough for him to squeeze through. Once inside, he stuck to the shadows, evading patrols as he made his way deeper into the complex. In what must have once been a command center, Timothy found what he was looking for: access to the outpost's ancient systems. With nimble fingers, he bypassed security protocols and activated the facility's emergency lockdown procedures. Alarms blared as blast doors slammed shut, cutting off sections of the outpost and isolating groups of Zoran's forces. Chaos erupted. Timothy used the confusion to his advantage, picking off isolated enemies with precise shots from his sidearm. He lured others into makeshift traps, using the outpost's deteriorating structure against them. A carefully placed explosive charge brought down a weakened corridor, burying a squad of Brunali soldiers beneath tons of rubble. As he fought his way towards the lower levels, Timothy's comm unit crackled to life. Zoran's voice, filled with rage, echoed through the outpost. "Face me, human, or are you too much of a coward to fight me directly?" Timothy steeled himself, knowing the final confrontation was at hand. He entered a vast chamber, littered with deactivated machinery and illuminated by flickering emergency lights. At its center stood Zoran, his carapace scarred and eyes blazing with hatred. "It ends here," Timothy said, raising his weapon. Zoran let out a guttural roar and charged. Timothy fired, but Zoran was faster than he'd anticipated. The Brunali's clawed hand knocked the gun from Timothy's grasp, sending it skittering across the floor. They grappled fiercely, Timothy's combat training pitted against Zoran's raw strength and fury. They traded blows, each impact echoing through the chamber. Timothy felt ribs crack as Zoran landed a vicious strike, but he fought through the pain, landing a series of quick jabs that forced the Brunali back. The floor beneath them groaned ominously. Timothy realized the structural damage from their earlier fighting had compromised the entire level. He needed to end this quickly. Feigning a stumble, Timothy lured Zoran towards a section of flooring that was already beginning to buckle. As Zoran lunged forward, Timothy sidestepped, using the Brunali's momentum against him. Zoran's eyes widened in surprise as the floor gave way beneath him. Timothy seized the opportunity, tackling Zoran. They tumbled together, crashing through multiple levels of the disintegrating outpost. Pain exploded through Timothy's body as they impacted hard on a lower floor. Dazed and bloodied, Timothy struggled to his feet. Zoran lay motionless nearby, pinned beneath a fallen support beam. The Brunali's followers, seeing their leader defeated, began to surrender. Timothy staggered towards the exit, each step an agony. His vision blurred as blood loss and exhaustion took their toll. He emerged into the harsh light of day, squinting as he saw familiar figures approaching, Kaz and his crew, with Murloc supported between them. Relief flooded through Timothy as he saw his friend alive. He tried to call out, but no sound came. His legs gave way and he collapsed to the ground. Murloc's face swam into view above him, mandibles clicking with concern. Timothy felt the Brunali's arms encircle him, cradling him gently. "We did it," Timothy whispered, his voice barely audible. "The cache. It's secure. Tell them. Tell them both sides. We can have peace." Murloc nodded, his compound eyes glistening with emotion. Timothy's own eyes grew heavy, the world around him fading. He tried to say more, to tell Murloc how much their friendship had meant, but he no longer had the strength. As darkness closed in, Timothy's last thought was of hope. Hope for the future he and Murloc had fought so hard to create. A future where humans and Brunali could live in harmony, their differences set aside in pursuit of a greater good. With a final, shuddering breath, Timothy Johnson, peacemaker, soldier, friend, slipped away, leaving behind a legacy that would shape the fate of two species for generations to come.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.